In some instances, I actually see some delays. I see areas that maybe I could have done better, but I also see you can sort of estimate academician in 2008 as an assistant lecturer. And this was just after I finished my master's degree in molecular biology. And I stayed at that particular level for almost 7 years. And this is because I started PhD in 2010, and then there were some sort of delays here and there, and then I ended up finishing up PhD in 2016. So if we had time, I would have broken this further, because I think there are also lessons that we can take from this. For example, just understanding the institutions that we are in, understanding how these programs work, understanding how they work when you are working in different, maybe your PhD involves more than one institution, more than one supervisors and things like those. And then in 2016, I was promoted to a lecturer, and you can see that I also stayed there at that level about 5 years. I think I could have stayed at this level much less, maybe 3 years, because that is the amount of years that we have from one career level to another. But again, challenges on how to balance what is required at international level and institutional level, which is something that I will also talk about. This is something that I learned later, that how do you balance that? What are the requirements at the institutional level versus the requirements at international level? And then I went on to senior lecturer this year. Again, you can see from 2016 to 2022, quite a number of years again. So I think if someone plans much better, they can do better, and they can shorten this period if you really plan quite ahead of time, but you also understand the environment that you are in. So just saying that in between that, I was also involved in so many other things, including administrative positions at my institution, which also takes a lot of time. So again, and this is something that we need to note, and I don't know how best to do it, because in most cases you can't say no, but you also need to see how best to balance the two, the research, the academia, and the administrative roles. But also not saying no to opportunities that you think may also be a bridge to your next level. So for example, here I'm talking about the honor to work with the Tanzania Human Genetics Organization, working also with the CICO Pan-Africa Consortium. So all these opportunities that also contribute to career, but again, you need to see how best to balance. So I'm sorry that I didn't have enough time to understand most of the fellows, and forgive me if I will be more biased to academic, because that is where I am. But I hope this can relate also to other fields. Maybe you're not an academician, but you're a researcher in a research institute. I think you can still take some lessons out of it. So as an academician, one of the core activities is teaching. So in most institutions, you find that you're supposed to allocate a particular percentage of time towards this, teaching undergraduate students and postgraduate students. Sometimes maybe you are lucky, you can be just teaching postgraduate students or undergraduate students alone. Again, you have to understand the environment that you are in, but also this depends on the level of career. For example, maybe you cannot supervise PhD students if you don't have a PhD, or maybe if you are not have not attained a particular level of seniority. These are things that, again, one has to understand better. And mostly how to take the most out of this experience of teaching undergraduate students and postgraduate students. And then as an academician, I also have a role in public service. What do we do in public service? So this is really utilizing knowledge to solve or address challenges at the community level, right? Provision of education, creating awareness, provision of intervention, and listening to the community. And I think this is something that I've learned quite late, I would say, but it's really critical to see how best to listen to the communities that we want to impact and and really understand them. And I will talk later how this is important in terms of research. And the third role as an academician is research. So what kind of research that we are talking about? So from projects, and here is where I'm starting to link some of the bits. So it could be small projects that you want to do. Maybe, and this is really to just sort of open up our minds to different levels of projects that we can do with the resources that are available. So this could be continuation of PhDs or masters or from teaching. But there are also opportunities to do projects which are nested in larger projects. And the larger projects may not necessarily be yours, but they could be yours. So maybe supervisors, if you still have a good link with them, mentors or collaborators. But we can also engage in collaborative projects. And I think sometimes we miss the opportunity because of the many things, many competing interests, but really understanding at the department level that you are in, or unit, or institution. What kind of research is going on at that particular department and who is doing what, and how best we can collaborate. And then at institutional level, multidisciplinarity is something that is being encouraged so much. So just understanding from at the institutional level, what kind of projects, what is the research agenda in that institution, what research areas that are key in that institution, and who is doing what. And then another level is multiple institutions. Which kind of collaborative projects can we pull collaborations from different institutions? And then also look at opportunities through private partners or industries. Again, at the research, as I said, I think it's really critical to link teaching, for those who are teaching like me, to link teaching with research. Because, as I said, for example, I was just teaching a biochemistry class last week, and I was teaching about enzymes, and I was asking my students I asked them to, in groups, to look for clinical applications of enzymes. And they came with a lot. There are 30 groups, each presented a case. That's a lot. And I thought to myself, and of course I also shared with them, that this could be small projects, measuring levels of enzymes as a diagnostic of particular disease. So these could be just projects that are within our reach, but also they may build up into bigger projects in the future. Again, in academic settings, we sometimes supervise masters, PhD students, and some of them, these are full master's program, master's research programs. Some of them are dissertations, some of them are masters in public health. So again, just looking at how to integrate their research projects to your research. So if you have a project, for example, how can you include a master's student in your project? Or how can you utilize whatever, because that student itself is a human resource, and it's a resource that is within reach. But how do you link it to your research interests, and also looking forward to other projects in the future? And then linking public service with research. So I said in the beginning that it's really important, and this is something that I've learned a bit late, that most of the times we do research in isolation. We don't really engage the community that much. But I think I have met people who have been very successful just because from when they started from the community. They understood and they created research problems after engagement to the community. And this really helps in terms of providing feedback to the community, but also it turns into a very easy buy-in if you are doing a research that is going to is leading to development of intervention or research products, because they were engaged from the very beginning. But also it gives you a base, a very strong base for further research. So you see that even as an academician, from teaching we can draw some research projects. From public service we can draw some research projects. So I'm just, and this has already been highlighted by Jay, and the reason I'm showing this is just to show the diversity and also the different levels of research projects or research grants, if you like. So I would say that after I finished PhD, I started with GloCal, which is a one-year fellowship. And this was a very strong base for me, because then that is when I started to gain experience in terms of doing independent research. And you know, when you come from PhD, it's really challenging, really knowing what to do and how to do. Sometimes we have a lot of ideas, but we don't know how to move forward, especially if you had a very good fellowship for your PhD and now you are transitioning. You want to do research, and how are you going to do it? So for me, this was a really important bridge. So just 1 year. How do you maximize the 1 year? If you have proposed a project, 1 year is not a long time. How do you make sure that you really achieve what you want to do? This is really critical. You know that all the funding bodies are looking at productivity, not just the research itself, but also publication. If it's an intervention, they're also looking at that, but it's just 1 year. So it's really key to plan very well and be very focused in what you want to achieve. But this also led to other fellowships.
So, Dr. Siana, I think the connection is kind of choppy currently at this point, so we can't hear you. So hopefully, can others hear? Yeah, I think so let's wait until she comes back on. Hopefully she can come back on. Okay.
All right. Yes. So sorry about that. So I was just saying that I'm showing this just to show different levels of research, fellowships, and research projects. So short research projects versus long period research projects, but also different levels of funding and what can be achieved out of it. So just seeing different funders. And again, this is just to show that there's much more, there are many partners and funding bodies, and I will talk about this a little bit later, including industry, Siana, yes. So lessons. So one of the things that I was asked to talk about is networking. And I think, and again, you can see that I was supervised by different people. one of my supervisors was in Muimbili University, another one was at London School, and another one was at King's College of London. And they both bring in a lot of expertise. So the lesson here is, if possible, to continue being in touch with them, collaborate with them, networking with them, because most of the time they're also looking for people to collaborate with at different levels. And I would say, for example, most of my supervisors, 2 out of 3, I still work with them up until now. And these were people who supervised me for my PhD, that is 2016, up until now, we work together. So now they tag into mentors. So then it may be a different situation for you, but if possible, I think that is something that I learned. But also we get mentors. So all of us here as fellows, you have mentors. Again, is to see how best to maximize from these mentors. And if during this time, during the time of fellowship, can you start to think of how you can work together in the future? But also peers in our departments, in our institutions. As I said, most of the time, some of the things that we want to do, they're actually the next door, and we just don't know. And then we all know that we need also to network with, for example, we have this group of fellows, maybe just knowing what each other is doing, and is there any room for collaborations amongst yourselves, amongst fellows, or amongst other regional bodies. We are part of region of different organizations, professional bodies. Is there a room for networking, for collaborating? So where do we find opportunities to network? So we have project meetings. If you don't have in your department or institution, you can try to start one. Departmental meetings, just in cultivating a research culture. And I know sometimes this is difficult, but I think it's key. So just discussing opportunities or resources that are available in the department for research. And then workshops at institutional level. I believe every institution, usually they do have these workshops, scientific conferences, and then national and international conferences. And I think someone like me who maybe, I think it's always, there are people who are very good in networking, and some like me, maybe not. To know that you have a challenge in networking, you can sort of, for example, if you're going for a workshop or a conference, you can actually look at the program and identify areas of interest and who is there for that particular session. And then maybe strategize to make sure that you meet these people during coffee or whatever, but just preparing before. Some people, it's natural, so they go, it's easy for them to network. For some people, it takes planning and be very strategic that I need to go and meet this person. And then the other key thing is the interdisciplinary collaboration. And I think there's a background noise. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, so go ahead.
Yeah, yes, thank you. So again, here I'm just showing, and this is really important, and I think it's more important now than it was 10 years ago. Seeing how best to link your discipline or your area of interest with other areas of interest. And here I'm biased, I'm giving an example of genetics because it's a cross-cutting field. It's applied in medicine, in industry, in agriculture, whatever. So this is important because sometimes, as I'm saying, is that one, you may be doing a research that, for example, is attracting equipment or sort of resources. And when you are writing that grant, when you are writing that application, if you can show that this particular equipment or these resources or expertise or skills that you are building up can also be applied beyond your project, then it becomes a strong argument, and it is the truth. And also the other way around, if you can also identify the same disciplines that you share with, then you can even leverage the resources that are existing. So for example, you will realize maybe I don't need to budget for this equipment because it's already available, even though it's not directly used within your department or within your institution sometimes, but it is available. It is being used, let's say a sequencing machine that is being used in an institution doing agriculture, but still it's a platform that can be used. And if you are developing, let's say, a particular expertise for analyzing a particular data, let's say it's microbiome, then this scale can be beyond that project. And it's really key to show that and build that. And then working across cultures, and I think even in this group itself, we can see that we are coming from different places, different cultures. And I think for all of us, the key thing is really we should be ready to learn, and learning doesn't end. Understand different culture contexts. For example, we went for a site visit in a certain country, and we found out that these people only work up until 3. So you can't plan anything beyond 3 because it will be really unfair for them. That is their culture. Or even the way that you dress, you find that you can't go to this country dressing in a particular way because you will offend some people. You won't even be able to work peacefully in that environment. Understanding their needs, languages. Yeah, I know there are people who are really good to learn language. Some of us maybe not, but what do we do about it? How do we accommodate these changes? This is something that we have to think about. And this applies not just for places that we go, maybe for attachments or for maybe as a site, a research site or whatever, but sometimes even in conferences, in workshops, you attend a workshop, maybe you are giving a talk and you understand that the audience maybe is not very good in English. What do we do about that? You want them to get your message, you want to be able to make a conversation after the project, after the presentation. So these things is just really keeping them at the back of the mind, have an open mind, be alert, be cautious, be very, be alert and look at your environment and learn from it. See how best to adapt, but always remain focused on your goal. So grants, and I think this is an area of interest for many of us. What do we do? How do we secure grant funding? So at different levels, I think these principles are the same. Identifying gaps in your research areas, what has been done globally and locally, what has not been covered globally and locally, whatever you want to apply for, is it addressing any of these gaps? Again, I think this is something that I learned, to balance local and global applications. The opportunities within our localities. Let's see how best we can address the gaps within our local contexts. But then how do we apply the same globally? But also understanding funding bodies of your research area. So I think this is something that, one, we can get from our mentors, from our peers, from our supervisors, from our senior people than us, our peers, but also we can search for them. But it's key to understand who funds your research areas, because really you can't just write and send your good idea to a wrong place. You will waste your time. So in global health, who are the great funders in global health? NIH, Wellcome Trust, ICGB, we have industrial partners who are interested in global health. But there are also opportunities that are at our nations, right? Some of the nations are good in funding research. You can also explore these. And then understand funding per your career level. This is also very important. A friend of mine just told me the other day that, you know what, you cannot fit at this level. It's true. So are you an early career scientist, or middle career, or late or senior scientist? Because some of them, and sometimes it's not very clear. So if it's not clear, what I do sometimes is really writing to the funding agents to ask. I tell them about myself and I ask, am I eligible? Or I ask people I know that have experience maybe in that funding scheme, so that I don't waste my time to send something while I'm not eligible. And then how does the grant fits? This is really important. Many of the institutions have research agenda. How does that application or your research, how does it address the research agenda at the institution? How does it address a national research agenda? Because most of the countries do have research agenda. But then what about the global agenda? And this is something I learned from OA's fellowship. They taught us, we went through the Sustainable Development Goals, and then they gave us an exercise to say, okay, this is your idea. Which sustainable development goals are being addressed? Because most of the time, when you show that, one, it helps you to understand the impact of the study, but two, it helps you to have a very strong application. And then how does the grant enhance capacities at different levels? At your institution, at national level, at regional level. And then it's really important to highlight career development in the context of the grant application. Past career developments and future expectations. For example, I'm now a lecturer, but I'm working towards becoming a senior lecturer in the coming 3 years. That's really important to show. And then link your application to career development of junior scientists. Show how are you mentoring junior scientists. For example, and I will talk a little bit when we are doing, looking at the publication, but then showing that a team is a mixture of both senior and junior scientists. And then this is really critical. And as I said in the beginning, that each funder is looking for a product, a research product, and one of it is publication. So I think this is sometimes very challenging. And I said, for example, and this is something that I've really encountered many times, a fellowship or a grant of 2 years is really not a long time. It needs to plan very early on. Otherwise, you finish your fellowship and you don't have a single paper. So it's really critical to start quite early on to say, how many papers do I want out of this grant? Maybe one. Where would I send this paper? Depending on the nature of the research. And then because maybe you want this paper to come out within 6 months, then you need to look at the turnaround time of the journal. Of course, it's important to publish in a good impact factor journal, but also, do you have the funding to cover? If it's an open access and then there are fees, which is good to have it open access, but then you also have to take into consideration the fees. Did you budget for the fees? And this is something that I've also learned, to budget for fees for publication. And then identify and list all potential manuscripts. Think about the type of manuscripts that you want. And at different career levels, we need both. We need just simple manuscripts, they may not go into very high impact factors journals, but we also need very good papers. So list potential manuscripts and journals, and then put the time allowance for them, because we all know most of the times this will take not less than 3 months. So for example, GloCal fellowship is 1 year, right? 3 months, we need to budget for that. 3 to 6 months. If you're very lucky, before 3 months. But it's really important to really take into consideration this, because one, it's important to have a good track record. Every time you go for the next grant, they will want to see a track record. If you're saying that you had this grant, where is the product? Where are the papers? And then, so it's really important to take this into consideration, but also when you are applying for a grant, you also know that you have to highlight these outputs. And then, as I said before, balancing of publications, local journals versus international journals, open access, First author versus co-authorship versus last author, because all have a meaning. For some people, it's really critical to have a first author paper at a particular level and for a particular name, but also showing that the ownership of the work. But it's also very important to co-author with other people, because that shows that you're collaborating with people. But it's also important to have last author people for particular career levels, because then it shows that you're already mentoring other people or you're supervising other people. And then dissemination of research funding. And this is something that we all include in our grant applications. Again, going back to our 1 year for GloCal fellowship. It's not a long time. How do we plan for this dissemination? It's important to identify potential conferences, but also look at dissemination at different levels, at our departments, at our institution, at national level and international level. But again, you remember we talked about the community and other stakeholders. Some of the grants want you to show very clearly how are you going to disseminate research funding to the community. And sometimes when you are doing a grant with different research partners, maybe the government, you would have to plan on how you're going to disseminate the findings to the government, to the industry. Maybe you have an industrial partner. And lastly, balancing professional and personal life. So I'm a mother of 2, and I also take care of other kids, but I'm also a wife, and I teach, I do research and everything. I think I may share this challenge with many of you, some of you maybe. It's really a challenge, but it's really important. Because without it, you see, this is very unbalanced. So how do you make sure? Because success is defined in different ways. Our kids need us, our spouses need us. We also need our own time to be quiet, to reflect on our lives, and so on and so forth. So I think, and I think there's no one formula for this, but I'm just highlighting some of the things that I think I've learned. For example, for me, I think it's really important for your spouse, if you have a wife or husband, let them understand very well, even from courtship, if you are not married yet, your work, what kind of work you are doing, it's really important for them to understand. And then planning our days, our week. You need to plan how much time you will be in the office. For example, for me, some of the people know that I have to come back home at a particular time. I'm doing this talk now and I'm at home because I need to sort of at the same time supervise what is going on. So see how best to balance. Make use of weekends if you can. You can still go to the office, you can still work, but make sure you also dedicate some of the time to your family. Remember, they don't, for example, for kids, they don't know, they don't understand what you are doing, but they really need your quality time as well. And for someone like me, I think for most of us, we want also to raise leaders out of our kids. We want to raise good people out of our kids, and that needs some work. And then plan for career breaks to do personal life if you can, right? But also you need to think about childbearing. If you want children, you need to think about that and plan for that. Then also see how best, if there are opportunities to travel with your partner, with your spouse. Take advantage of personal leaves, maternity leaves for those that for those who have these, and take advantage of grants that allow or support career breaks. For example, I'm giving an example of NIH. For my K43, I think I've got 2 administrative supplements. And one was when I myself had a career break due to child bearing. And that was really useful because at that particular moment, there's a lot of this, you have to be very flexible. You need people to assist you in so many ways. So these administrative supplements are really useful. But again, for a fellowship like OST, which is really focused on women in science, I remember that they budgeted for my family even to go with me in Oxford for a month. So some of these grants do actually directly support such arrangements. I think this maybe is my last slide, understanding mentorship. And I think this is really important for you at this particular level, but also for us, because even for myself, I still work with mentors for my K43. And I think one of the things that we can do, and again, I'm just presenting what I think is best, is one, to understand each mentor's expertise. If possible, to clarify expectations from both sides. What are your expectations to your mentors? I know we write those mentors statements, mentors plans, but really just having clarity and what do they expect from you from quite early on, and how do you manage that? Is it realistic? Is it manageable? And then planning for mentorship meetings. For me, I think what worked was having both separate meetings with each mentor, but also sometimes, if possible, having mentors meeting as a group. So yeah, so I think that was my last slide, and I hope, I hope I left some time for questions and discussion. Thank you very much.
Great.
Hello?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your path, and really, really inspiring in terms of what you have accomplished so far and continue to accomplish. So yeah, I think this is great. We have time for questions. I want to start by just addressing Jonathan's question in the chat. Jonathan's question is, please provide some detail regarding requirements for categorizing people into early, middle, and senior career stages.
Okay, so I will try to answer that. In fact, I was looking at that when I was preparing this talk. I had to go back and think and look at what are the definitions. I think most of the times these are categorized for those who have PhD. So from the time that you had your PhD, I think it's three to 5 years. That is early career. And then from there, it's middle career. But again, depending on how fast you are moving through the ladder, again, you are given about maybe 5 or more years. But if there's no progress, let's say you graduated your PhD, you became a lecturer, right? Now you're supposed to move to a senior lecturer. If that didn't happen, in terms of time from PhD completion, you may not be eligible to be an early career because you're past beyond the 5 years. But the other category is with age, up to 35, up to 40, I think, is early career. I have to look at that in detail. And then up to 45, middle, and after that you are getting senior. So there are two categories based on PhD and based on age. I think the floor is open for anyone to also contribute. So if you have any additions to that, please feel free. But just to say that I think the importance there is, for example, if you're looking at a particular grant, you have to read the requirements very carefully. They will say what they mean by this particular person, this particular level. They will say the expectations. And if it's not very clear to you, do not hesitate to write to them to ask. You can send them your CV saying that this is me. Am I eligible? That is what sometimes I have to do.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good advice. And I think just to add one more I guess in relation to, the National Institute of Health funding, I think it's important to, as Dr. Siana said, look at the eligibility criteria. Some of these mechanisms have a definition of what NIH views as an early stage investigator. So they have a specific definition. So I think it's something like, your terminal degree, for example, PhD within 10 years, and then also for those who have not gotten like an R grant mechanism, you're eligible to apply as an early stage investigator. And I think different funding mechanisms have different criteria. So I think it's important to kind of take a look at, the eligibility. So let's see, any other reflections, questions? I have a question for Dr. Siana. So, such an impressive career, and so just wanted to hear your thoughts about the process of securing your career development K43 award. And I wanted to see if you can speak a little bit more about the process, how challenging or how not challenging it was to get that award. Was it successful like the first submission, or did you have to revise and resubmit?
Thank you very much, Jay. So so I think that's really a good question. It was not very straightforward for me. I did submit the first time, it was not successful, and I did resubmit the following year. That's when it was funded. Okay. What were the lessons for me? I think, and this is something that I would say for all of us here, to start now. This is why it's really important to maintain the relationships that we have, if possible. And if you are planning to continue in the same career line. Because, for example, a K43 requires to have 2 mentors, minimum of 2 mentors. So it's really important to start thinking of who is going to be your mentor. Yeah, these could be people that you are meeting during the conferences, or maybe the current mentor that you have now, I don't know. But that's key, a local mentor and a US mentor, right? But these are not just mentors. These are people who shows, seniority, but not just seniority, people who have really, they have vast experience and expertise in the area of your research. So it's not just anyone in US, no, but someone who links very well with what you want to do. And sometimes it could be easy to identify them through the existing relationships that you have. For me, I continued with my mentor, who was my supervisor for my PhD, 2 of them actually. So that my local mentor was the one who was my PhD supervisor. I had a trans mentor who was also previously my PhD supervisor from King's College of London. And these 2, actually my local mentor assisted me to get the US mentor. So it could be that way. Just recently, I assisted someone to submit a K43 from my institution. And it happened that she was doing an area that I could identify one of the mentor who was my mentor in a different grant. So we approached him and he agreed to be a mentor in her grant. So existing relationships, but it needs planning. Again, for something like K43, the schedule is very clear. The timelines are very clear. It's usually the same time every year. So you can even start planning from now, knowing that Ks are usually submitted around October or November, beginning of November. What is required? For example, you need reference letters. How many? And I usually tell people that I usually start with things that are beyond my control, things that you need from other people, because that depends on their schedules, how busy they are. So if you need letters of support, if you need reference letters, you need to start very early. while you can decide not to sleep just to write the research strategy. But for them, you can't control that. So you have to start quite early on. So for me, it was not straightforward, but I'm glad that I had a very good base. Again, showing the transition. For example, a K43 is a career development grant. So the career development goals are equally important to the research goals. And you have to write very well what your career goals are and how are you going to achieve them, while you also write your research strategy. So maybe I will stop there.
Really great, great advice. And I would say that, for all of us, getting a grant proposal funded, whether it's a career development award or a research proposal, I think it's important for us to, stay the course and don't be discouraged if you don't get funded the first time around. Because the reality of the current climate is it's really rare for proposals, including career development award, to get funded during the initial submission. So, I think setting your expectations, and as Siana mentioned, planning, have a long-term plan. So great, if it gets funded the first time around, that's wonderful. But at the same time, you need to be, ready to accept kind of thinking about revising and resubmitting it in the next cycle. And I think the truth is, you don't want to be discouraged, and there are many things you can learn from the initial review. And if you're flexible and open about potential revisions, it'll make your application stronger. So yeah, really great advice. We have, let's see, we have just a couple more minutes. Just wanted to also recognize the important point that Siana mentioned about balancing your personal and professional goals. I think it's really true to recognize that as an important piece. And just kind of drawing from my personal experience, I think the mentors that you have are also important in supporting how you balance your career, whether it's personal, balancing your professional and personal career goals, personal goals. I think if the mentor really is aligned with your priorities, I think that can also help you. So drawing from my past experience, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I have boy-girl twins. My mentor also happens to be a parent, so she would understand what it means to raise 12-year-old boy-girl twins. My other mentor is, she's single, she's senior, but she doesn't have any kids. So she would say, you got to travel to these countries for a project. And she doesn't really appreciate or recognize the importance of, having intentional time with your kids. So I think aligning, your priorities with your mentors is also really important. Okay, let's see. Any last comments for Siana? Just checking the chat. Okay. Oh, there you go. Okay. Yeah, just a great talk. I concur. Well, thank you for taking the time to share your work and your advice. This has been really helpful. And best wishes to you and continued success. Christine, just wanted to make sure we don't have our career development seminar for the month of December, correct?
Yeah, our next session will be in January.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all of us, thank you for your attention, and have a wonderful, so in the US tomorrow is our Thanksgiving. So have a wonderful holiday break, and have a wonderful Christmas and New Year's, and we'll reconvene in January. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye,
Thank you.
and best wishes to all of you.
All right. Thank you.